All right, sounds good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Donna Heitmanek. I am the administrator of the Science of Reading What I Should Have Learned in College Facebook page. And we're here tonight with Trevor Clark from Toronto, Canada. Trevor reached out to me last year to talk about his unique situation and some things that he's done with his to remediate his dyslexia. And so he's a bright young man with a bright future that has worked really, really hard to remediate his situation. So welcome, Trevor.
Hello.
Hello. And would you start off by briefly telling us what you were like growing up and your academic career?
So for me growing up, my mom knew very early that there was something just a little bit off with me. And I was lucky I got diagnosed really early in grade 1. And then I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. And that was great to have that tool that I knew what was wrong with me, so we could sort of work on it and fix it. But I want to draw a quick point into that I see parents often spending money after money after money for diagnosis, when diagnosis is, it's not the key. It just tells you what the red flag is. It doesn't tell you exactly how to fix it sometimes. So sometimes we need to think a little bit away from get another diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So then I went from basically grade 1 to grade 8. So I went to grade 7, sort of business as usual, going through school. And being a non-reader, I just relied so much on assistive technology and using that to get through. So school was difficult for me, but I always like to think school is difficult for everyone. Everyone thinks they're in the hardest program and doing the hardest things. So I never really thought much of it. And then in grade 8 and grade 9, I went to a demonstration school, which is these schools around here in Ontario. There's 3 of them. And one school that I went to was Trillium. And they let 40 kids in, and you have to meet 2 thresholds. One, you have to be dyslexic. And then one, you have to have a higher than normal or a normal IQ. So I met those thresholds. And those schools are designed, and they're boarding schools, to teach you how to read if you're dyslexic. And so I went there for 2 years. Most students only go for 1 year, but I went for 2 because essentially I never improved on the first year. And then the next year after that, I improved a little bit, but still didn't improve that much, which was kind of upsetting for me, being in that classroom and being there at a school that was designed to teach me how to read. Just surely could not. It failed really badly. Mm-hmm. So then I graduated, and then I went to college. I went to college for forestry, did that for 2 years, ended up passing that. So I am a college graduate, which is kind of cool to think that I graduated essentially completely a non-reader. Again, I just relied so much on my assistive technology to get me through it, because without it, I would have never made it anywhere.
So that's a very interesting career, and it's unfortunate that you had that happen to you, that you were still basically illiterate and in college, but you did graduate. So so I know there's a lot to your history since college. Do you want to share what you've been doing in the past few years to help improve yourself?
So being a non-reader, it's really hard to get the good work that pays half decently. And I just got to a point where it was just, I have to climb this mountain to be able to be more successful in my field and be able to get a better job, essentially. So I just basically started to try again, and I hired a private tutor, and I did that for a few hours, but really quickly on, I didn't make much gains, and it was sort of the same thing that I was doing through school. So of course it wouldn't make that much of a difference. I thought maybe going through it one-on-one would have huge benefits, but it didn't really seem to make that much of a difference. So I ended with that of a tutor, with a private tutor, and then I just relied basically on 4 close friends. and I sifted through all the research of what sort of needs to be done and to remediate myself. And I tried to keep everything as simple as possible and just worked a lot with my friends and did that. I did that mainly because it was easiest and it was really cheap because I didn't have to pay them anything. So that was always nice factor as well.
Briefly tell us what you found in the research.
So I found in the research that basically there's a lot of reading programs out there are good, and a lot of them are based on phonics, phonics is really important and really key, but they're missing that whole other piece, which is the whole phonological awareness piece and of how to properly remediate that. So then you're ending up at phonemic proficiency. And once I found that piece out of, okay, that's a huge piece of why I'm dyslexic and why nothing else was sticking to me and nothing was working, because I was so weak in that area and I wasn't able to learn a lot of my letter sounds and sound words out consistently and remember them and recall them. So once I found that out, I figured, well, what's sort of the best way and what's the easiest way to remediate that? And that's pretty clear. The National Reading Panel makes that like blatantly clear that it's doing manipulations of sounds in words, so doing phoneme manipulations. So I basically did a lot of that, and I used Equipped for Reading Success, and then I used a book from the Haggerty Company, I can't remember the name of it, and then I did other sort of vowel replace drills and whatnot. But the biggest thing that I did is I took 5 weeks where I did 15 minutes in the morning before I went to work, and then 15 minutes when I came home with one of my friends, where I would just do phoneme manipulations. And I did this for 5 weeks. And then that ended up being just a little bit over 20 hours in such a short period of time. And that really basically put the hammer down and was able to break through that barrier. And I needed to still do more. I wasn't proficient as I believed I needed to be, but because I did it so much in a short time in such a structured way, I was able to excel through it at a somewhat quicker rate than what it would have been if I would have done 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, because after all, it was 20 hours to just get things, I'm going to say, started and working to a decent level, I'll say. But I ended up doing, I think it was 36 hours in total of just manipulations. So it took a lot of remediation. And when I hear people doing 5 minutes in a class, I'm thinking, why? Let's really put the hammer down and really get that done so the other things can be easier. I don't think there's very many students that are going to need 36 hours of manipulations.
Exactly.
But some students are going to need 5, some students are going to need 10, 15. But why don't we just sort of cross that off the list and be like, all right, we passed that section, so now we're just going to do upkeep of that skill.
So how did you notice that you were getting better? Was it just intuition, or or did you have data behind that?
So I was super lucky, and basically I had about 8 hours of remediation, and then I was able to get an assessment in Toronto, and that looked at so many standardized tests. I think there was 4 or 5 on there. So I did that, and then roughly 10 months later, I did the same assessments again. So I was able to see my gains across the board.
Okay.
So I was able to really see it. And then I did do progress monitoring within that 10 months. I'll say I did a very poor job of it, but at the same time, there was a lot going on in my life in general. And, it's hard to do everything perfectly when I'm sort of the way that one of my friends likes to think about it is like, you're the teacher, you're the student, you're the researcher. Like, it's a lot of hats to wear. It's a lot of things to do, a lot of moving parts. So I always knew I was getting better, but then to have my first reassessment and to see those numbers was really just so exciting to me, because I'm a huge research nut in general, but then to see these numbers, and like that I was able to remediate myself in huge ways, like massive ways. So I was
Like
really excited about
you
that.
got the secret, or but you don't want it to be a secret. And it should
No, I don't want it to be a secret.
right.
And that's like, I don't want it to be a secret. And the only real secret that I think it is don't overcomplicate, like in my case, like don't overcomplicate things, make things as easy as possible, and just put in the hard yards, put in the hard work, and things get done. Like with teaching letter sounds, that was like like I'm gonna say the vowel teams and whatnot, and a lot of those things that can say like 3 things or 2 things. To learn those things, I did 3 times a day. I had flashcards. I have one right here.
Mhm.
Or it's like all the ways to show the long I sound, and then there's 6, by the way, and then I would try and remember them and write them down. So I'd pick sort of 3 flashcards at a time, and then I would write them down, and I'd do that sort of 3 times throughout the day, because I did that because I wanted to know every sound, and I just didn't want any sort of doubt of, oh well, maybe he's not getting it because he doesn't have enough phonics, he doesn't have enough letter
Sure.
sounds.
Mhm.
And I didn't want anyone to say those things of like, well, why isn't he getting it? Because he definitely has enough letter sounds, and he's definitely done enough manipulations. And then when you do those things and get to that point where no one can say, well, you didn't do enough of this, you will eventually get there. And then it's all just about reading text.
So what would your suggestion be, or what advice would you like to give schools of education or school districts to change things for struggling dyslexic readers?
So one thing would be early screening, which is important. I do certainly like assessments. I just don't think there's a need for it at such an early age, being grade 1 or before grade 1. But early screening is so important. And then knowing what to do from that point and being able to sort of make things as simple as possible. But a big thing that I would like to say to schools, and maybe I shouldn't, is sort of stop arguing about what is the absolute best like phonics program, what's the best manipulation program. And we know that there's not a massive difference between synthetic phonics programs. They're all relatively the same. The National Reading Panel has a really great breakdown of that, and there is a difference, but it's not that big. So if we stop arguing and just pick a synthetic phonics program, pick a manipulation, I'm going to call it strategy or program, and sort of stick with it, and you can really get through it and have a lot of good gains that way. But if we're constantly arguing about, well, this program is better, this program is better, and that may be true in some cases,
Mhm.
but for the most part, it all comes out in the wash if you just do manipulations and you teach letter sounds and it's in a synthetic style.
Mhm.
We have a lot of research showing that of programs that are basically drastically different, but they do those 2 things and they end up with having the same results.
Tell me what, now that you've gone through this remediation that you've created, what are some of the things that you're still working on for yourself?
So one of the things that I'm still working on for myself would be spelling right now. I can spell decently well, but it's certainly, I struggle with it. And then just this may sort of undersell myself a bit, but just like letter production and printing sort of a thing,
Sure.
because it's not as effortless as reading is now. Reading is very effortless and it flows very well for me, and I can do it without effort. But printing, just printing simple sentences and whatnot, those are things that I need to work on, and definitely my spelling. But that makes sense because basically from age 0 to 25, I spelled nothing like my whole life. So
Right.
just, practicing printing letters and spelling things and going through that. And that'll therefore also help me with my reading of those little gaps and those little sort of idiosyncrasies that sort of occur with the reading as well. So yeah, but
When
spelling
I
is
first,
a whole other ball game.
And when I first met you, you used the term pen to paper, pen to paper. And that really stuck with me because you were always talking about writing and getting your sounds down on paper. Am I right?
Yes. Yes. And that was a big thing with the flashcards, is just writing it pen to paper, making the sounds of the word while I was making it on the paper, and making that sort of connection very clear and ingrained in my mind. But again, still with doing all of that, I still need more, because I wasn't so much focusing on the actual printing per se. But
Mhm.
that was sort of my own fault. But again, I didn't know everything, and I still don't know everything now. But yeah, it's neat to look back and see some of the things that I did earlier on and be like, wow, that was not as no, that was not very smart to do that much of that, or do that little of that. So, but
So
yeah, everything learning.
you're
Sorry.
recommending early identification. What else would you tell first grade or kindergarten teachers that they should be doing or looking for?
So one other thing that I'm going to say as a personal note is for teachers to stop calling people severe dyslexics. It doesn't make any sense to me if everyone, like, it's very popularized, I feel, around here, of saying, you know, he's a severe dyslexic, he's a severe dyslexic. If everyone's severe, that's sort of the norm. So that's one thing that I just wanted to mention. But sort of just what, in terms of looking for, of just like, how well is their letter production when they're printing? How is their rapid automatic naming of letter names and sounds? Sort of our early tracers to see where they could possibly stand.
That's really good advice because you're absolutely right. Those are the markers that we look for, is rapid naming and the ability to
Yeah,
say sounds, maybe some blending of those sounds.
yeah,
Retrieve the sounds. Can they write the sounds? Yep, you're right.
mm,
Okay, and
yeah.
here's some final words for us. So tell us what you're up to these days.
So now, since I've done all of this research, and then I've come to sort of a good level of reading, that I've started tutoring other students, which has been a lot of fun to me, to be on the other side of the table. I
Yes.
smile the whole time when I'm doing it. It's really good, and I just thoroughly enjoy giving back and just watching people that were basically me, that were struggling so well, and I'm able to sort of light that tunnel and be their hand and walk them through it and help them out. It's very rewarding. I like doing it so much. I'm working on trying to figure out how to get my students, I should say, a pre and post test of standardized measures, because right now I'm just doing my own thing, but I will eventually figure out how to do that, so I can just see how effective I can be when I have a better game plan and a better sense when I'm on the other side of the table. Because yeah, it'll be really interesting to see.
Well, I see a bright future for you in that. I mean, if you get formalized training, that might be a real strong possibility for you. So if
Yeah.
someone wanted to get hold of you, what would they do?
So you can go to my website, and there's an email there, and you can email it through there.
What's your
Marnie will
website?
Donna will link it in the
Oh,
description, because I
okay.
can't remember the name of the website.
That's okay.
Yeah, which is embarrassing, but yeah.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've had trouble remembering the science of reading, what I should have learned in college. So it happens.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but it's working.
Yeah, that
So, Trevor, I want to thank you for your time. And not only that, for your perseverance in helping yourself, and now you're helping others. And so there's a lot to be said about that. And we are learning from you because you have walked the walk and you're talking it now. So we're really proud of where you've come from and where you're going. So thanks for your time today, and hope to see you around.
all right. Bye.
Bye-bye.